Hey, welcome everybody. Welcome aboard. Hey, folks. So let's get the numbers up. Feel free to share away, and we'll get started with today's show in a little less than a minute. Today's company update, company live stream. It's like a Zoom call. Zoom call, except better. All right. Is everybody sharing? Everybody sharing away. So the thing that kind of weirds me out, I read recently that one way to think about your future lifespan is if you're my age anyways, you have an average of 1,000 to 2,000 weeks left, average American male lifespan from where I am right now. So anyway, the mind trick they say is to estimate how much life you have left, how much runway you have by weeks instead of days. And if you do that, you see how short your time is, whoever you are, right? So in my case, if I reach average male life expectancy in my country, I have 1,000 to 2,000 weeks left, which doesn't sound like an enormous amount of time, right? I don't do these every week. Don't do these every week with the company. This is kind of a rarity at this point. It's kind of a delicacy, little Sunday delicacy. And so you think about it, how many more of these do I have ahead? Considering I do one, quite sporadically at this point. Hey, everybody. Uh, so like maybe I have 50 to 100 live streams ahead for the rest of my life. Isn't that crazy to think about? Isn't that absolutely crazy to think about? Yeah, share this link and especially to people in the crypto and wealth community, share away. But yeah, so today's thought experiment is if we're headed into a recession where we don't need to deal with Trump cultism, doesn't matter if you like Trump or not. Uh, this is not a judgment on Trump. This is if we're headed into a recession, are things like Bitcoin and Ether going to become more relevant? Do they become more relevant or do they get brushed to the sidelines? That's the big question. And what place, if any, what place, if any, do assets like gold ETFs have in trying to weather this storm? And by the storm, I mean people are posting videos on social media of empty ports in Los Angeles and some other major American port cities, nearly empty, which doesn't bode well for summer consumers. Someone says Ethereum is dead, XRP is the one. How do you not know this? I've never owned any XRP, and I likely never will. Never owned any. At least not wittingly. Not wittingly, as that politician said years ago. Not intentionally. I haven't acquired any XRP or Ripple, and I never will. It just doesn't seem to me like what decentralized crypto should be. Nothing against Brad Garlinghouse and all them, but it's like, why do you need a company? Why is this guy hanging out at the World Economic Forum? 1,000 times less cool than Satoshi. Satoshi, who built the perfect Chinese finger trap for money, and then left with his privacy intact, whoever or whatever he is. Uh, 1,000 times cooler than this guy sucking up for social status at World Economic Forum meetings. And yeah, that's my opinion. You're welcome to disagree. Do we have any other people in the the troll box who have questions or ideas? But yeah, so you frame how much life you have left in terms of weeks instead of days, and it suddenly hits you how short a human life is. You spend half your life just growing and getting an education and your taste of success and failure. A little taste for failure, and then before you know it, half your life's gone. You have 1,000 weeks left, and maybe 50 live streams. I'll maybe hang out with the internet 50 more times in my life. Isn't that crazy? So this is like a rare art piece. This is like a Banksy or something. It's a rare piece of art that's happening right now, right in front of you guys. It's happening for your benefit. Happy Sunday, everybody. But yeah, the company has come a long way, and there's this Charlie Munger quote about trumpet your failures and not your successes. You know, in other words, don't be cocky, I guess. If I were to trumpet my failures, we could be here all day. We could just trauma dump all day long. But I feel like the things I went through are things that all humans went through with few exceptions, right? The pandemic, uncertainty, a lot of unpleasant little experiences through the pandemic. Felt like lifetime movie of the week in retrospect, right? Lots of weird, horrific stuff that happened to all of us. And we just have to process it and move on. But yeah, if I were to talk about my failings, I mean, we could be here till 9 p.m. We want this to be a short and concise stream that will get a lot of shares later tonight when it gets promoted. Ken says he's 68. He'll take any week he can get. I just find it mind blowing how short a human life is, and it's really weird to me how personality and your perception of the world is so tied into your biological age, right? In other words, like a baby watching this live stream for some reason. This obviously is meant for adults only. But if a baby were watching this content, they probably wouldn't get much out of it, right? They wouldn't really know what I'm talking about. They wouldn't understand even the words that I'm using because they're pre-verbal, right? Uh, and yet, like a person who's 20, they're going to understand what I'm saying, but not necessarily the stuff about how fast you age. And the person who's maybe 80 is going to have a completely different view of what I'm saying than somebody around my age, influenced by their own biological decline. It's totally crazy to think about that your sense of the world and your personality are so tied into like, are you an old person? Are you a college student? Are you elderly? Are you hunched over? Seems like one of the great challenges, right? To give people more choice in that area. Like if you want to live longer, I think you should be able to live longer. There's clearly enough room on the planet. And if we have to, sounds like Mars is going to be colonized within the next 20 or 50 years or something. So space is not an issue. If you want to maintain your consciousness, I think you should be able to do it uh, in a way other than some hunched over, shriveled up shell. But we got to get there. We got to figure out how to solve all this stuff. And I feel like with Bitcoin and Ethereum, at least many of the OGs out there, many of you guys can attest to this in the troll box. With many of the first and second generation crypto adopters, in other words, people like 5, 10 years ago, uh, I feel like that's already solved abundance for a lot of people. A lot of people have already figured out wealth and money as a result of Bitcoin's invention. And now the next big challenge is how do we like survive? Not just the recession that might be imminent, according to some people. Uh, how do we survive not just economically, but how do we preserve our consciousness? How do we get beyond this mediocrity of dying in your mid 70s that hits so many great people? Uh, how do we build a detour? Uh, Someone says they don't know if Ether will survive the next 5 years, though. LOL, maybe. LOL, maybe. Well, that's why we're here. Get the numbers up. Let's share a link to this maybe on those of you who are Redditors. Share a link on Reddit, Ethereum, and the Bitcoin subreddit. You can share a link to. Just copy and paste the YouTube link and share away on the Reddit, as Trump would probably call it, right? The Reddit. Uh, let's get the numbers up. Let's see what the crowd thinks. Is Ether gone? Is Ether no longer the big one? Because it seems like it still does a lot of stuff that Bitcoin just can't do. And it does it in a way more professional manner than things like Solana. People ask me about these other smart blockchains. Solana has a very kind of checkered reputation, to put it mildly. Whereas Ethereum is used by a number of financial brands and stuff. And it was the first smart contract capable blockchain, and much faster than Bitcoin in terms of confirmation times. But Bitcoin is the digital gold. That's what we're told. That's what BlackRock tells us, right? Is that they do a Bitcoin ETF because it's like the digital gold. Um, yeah, smash that like. Let's get all the numbers. Let's get the numbers. Come on, get in there. I'm going to pour a little glass of grape juice, and we'll just try to chart this out. Is all the market concentration going to move toward Bitcoin now, or does Ether still stand a chance? Or should we all give up and just put our money passively into gold ETFs, as I've done to some extent? I sleep very well because I have decent gold ETF allocation. And I know people out there who are black pilled and just paranoid and weirdos and stuff. They're like, "Oh, you've just got an ETF that links to an empty box somewhere." To an empty box somewhere. But that's not actually true, right? These things are audited on a regular basis. The vaults that under underwrite the actual, claims of the ETF or whatever. The actual assets of the ETF are gold bars sitting in vaults, usually in London and New York City. And they have security guards, and they're regularly audited and tested for purity and all that stuff. And so I don't have a large degree of doubt as to whether or not the gold is there. Um, and when you redeem it through your brokerage account, if you do that, if you sell it, you get the money just as fast as selling a stock. It's exactly as liquid. At least that's been my experience. And so to say the money's not there is just really childish, and is for people who don't understand the financial system. If the money's not there, there's at least somebody to sue. Right? These custodians for the gold ETFs tend to be some of the largest banks, like JP Morgan and Citibank. So if there's truly nothing there, at least you've got a huge public company that your lawyers can claw into, right? So, but for the purposes of like a normal human being like me or you, I feel like there's enough there. I feel like it's legit enough, and it's not the same as satchel of gold coins if the world ends, and if credit card machines don't work, and if there's no internet. That's a different ballpark, right? But I'm not actively planning for that world. And if that world comes, there should at least be some honeymoon period, I would expect, where you can cash out your ETFs before all modernity collapses, right? Where you can cash out your ETFs and benefit from whatever run up gold and silver might see if civilization were to really fall apart. But again, I'm not preparing for that world. And so, in the world of professional etiquette and auditors and lawyers and stuff, the gold's there. It's in New York. It's in London. Unlike the Fort Knox, where we have no idea because it's Uncle Sam. When it comes to private investors and big banks and stuff, there's something there. Uh, Here we go. That's the optimism I like to see. Someone says theoretically they could live for another 50 years. Yeah, maybe you have more than the 1,000 or 2,000 weeks that I've charted for myself. But how depressing if true, right? If we don't solve for immortality pretty soon. Now that we've solved for abundance, right? If you have enough Bitcoin or Ether, you have something that's never going to be worth nothing, right? Even as uncool as Ether is lately, you have something that's never going to be worth nothing, and something for which there is now a bunch of real demand. Um, and you can say the same about gold and silver. You can say exactly the same thing about those, but those are not as finite as the Bitcoin and Ether supply, right? Because Bitcoin and Ether, how much will exist is programmed. It's hard programmed. In the case of Ether, in terms of the stake rewards, you can see how much new ones will be generated over time. With gold and silver, you don't see how much is generated over time. There might be supply shocks either way, right? You might find huge new mining deposits somewhere on planet Earth or close by in the solar system, and that could impact the value. Um, Phil says I was right about Bitcoin. I was right about BTC. It's funny. I was in Texas recently. I was at a nice restaurant, and BTC was one of the drinks on the menu. It's one of the cocktails is BTC, and this is Austin, Texas, tech hub of the U.S. aside from California. So I would assume that the naming of this cocktail was intentional, right? And yeah, Bitcoin is such a home run. To go back to the Charlie Munger quote about trumpet your failures and not your successes. I was never really misled by uh, the alt community, and I don't see Ether as a true alt. Ether is a Honda to Bitcoin's Toyota. It's not quite comparable, but it's not an altcoin that's trying to steal Bitcoin's market cap. And I've been very principled about not straying to these small, weird projects, actually. And it seems like some people create this fan fiction where they make it sound like I dedicate a lot of my time and money to altcoins when I don't at all. I guess Litecoin is a true altcoin, and I've spent some time using that and talking about it. But that's the first altcoin, right? It's pretty principled in the sense that it's open source code that so many people have looked at, and it has some real backing, or not backing, but some real acceptance by the likes of like PayPal. You can buy it there, and BitPay. You can use it through BitPay, which powers a lot of bullion and gold sites and stuff, except BitPay. So Litecoin for an altcoin has really shown, I think, its competency. Not to mention the fact that it was built by Charlie Lee, who is a top executive at Coinbase after he left Google. And he seems to have been very principled about, he's kind of an anti Satoshi, right? Whereas Satoshi created this thing, Bitcoin, and then disappeared, and we never hear who he is. We don't get that part of the story. With Charlie Lee, you know everything about him, right? And he's accessible to the public, and he regularly does events and stuff, or at least he did until recently. And so again, it's an interesting thought experiment because it's like, can a crypto take off without the anonymity of Satoshi? And here, if you want to play that thought experiment, you have Litecoin, which again is used by BitPay as a payment option. Um, but obviously, I think Bitcoin is number one. It's the most looked at in terms of the source code, keeping it secure. It's the most accepted by businesses, both small businesses like coffee shops and random Colorado towns and California places, as well as big business like BlackRock and Fidelity. So Bitcoin, I think, is currently number one because it's the most understood. And certainly, I think Satoshi being mystery man, somebody you can't jail and you can't get his million coins out of him, right? You can't, under duress, take his million coins and dump the whole market. I think for those reasons, it's a very valuable and fascinating thing that no altcoin can come close to. But again, if you want to play the thought experiment that maybe the anonymity of the creator doesn't matter, There's Litecoin, and I'm talking about altcoins though. I'd say like 1,000 to 1 my content has been Bitcoin and Ether, not small coins. And if you read my books on Amazon, collect them all if you want. Link in my about page of this channel to the Amazon stuff. But if you read my books, I don't mention altcoins really at all. So that should tell you what the um, level of focus that I put on those, right? So gold, I think, is very special because as we approach quantum supremacy, as it's called, as we approach this quantum supremacy moment where quantum arrays will be able to brute force people's crypto wallets. If you have a cold stored wallet somewhere, uh, somebody's quantum computer could just break it one day and you wouldn't even know until you check on it, see a zero balance. That's kind of terrifying, right? So as that day approaches, things like gold and silver become more significant, I think, because you can't hack a gold bar. Doesn't matter how fast and how powerful your quantum computer is, you just can't hack it because it's just a bar of a physical element sitting in a basement somewhere in New York, or in London or Hong Kong or somewhere. Um, but between the two, I think Bitcoin has performed more like a digital gold than Ether. Ether is very interesting, I think, but in terms of which one has weathered the storm best, the storm of inflation, I like the literal thunder outside as I say storm. It's not a special effect. Uh, Yeah, I think it's weathered the storm better than Ether for sure. But they both achieved big ETFs. They both have big ETFs on Wall Street, which is a, you know, huge accomplishment because it opens everybody up to these things. Everybody has a brokerage account, whether it's E-Trade or something through their workplace. And now the average person can get crypto. Before the average person couldn't, and there was a problem there. There was some kind of, gap in knowledge. And plus, there are all these benefits, of course, in my opinion, anyways, not financial advice. There are all these benefits once you financialize a crypto. Once you can hold it as an ETF, you get things like you can use that as your margin base, right? If you play on margin, you use that as your margin base, and you can go buy stock with it. Uh, Whereas you can't do that with just some crypto that's sitting on an exchange, right? So again, I think the ETF approvals of Bitcoin and Ether, which started in winter 2024, I think that stuff is absolutely massive, and it does set those two apart from every other blockchain, every other crypto out there. But again, I've come to appreciate gold and silver in recent years because there's this massive Achilles heel to the entire crypto industry, and that is quantum computing. Whereas gold, we could be in the 2040s and we could have strong AI and no real freedom. And gold will still have a market value, which is cool to think about. Would you guys be deeply offended if I poured some grape juice, some non psychoactive, entirely sponsorship friendly grape juice? No? Yes. Maybe I'll just pour a little fire water. No is in you. No is in I cannot, or no is in you're not offended if I do. Got to be more specific here. Well, I'll tell you what. I'll just stay at my sharpest. Not offended. Okay. Let's get those numbers up while I'm pouring this. All right. Company numbers. We want strong showing here. Think about it. I'll do one of these maybe 50 more times in my lifetime. That's it. I don't do stuff that crazy anymore. I'm a responsible man. I'm almost 40 years old. Almost 40. All right, BRB. All right, cheers, everybody. This is just non-alcoholic production grape juice for entertainment purposes only. The gold color. Thank you. Cheers. Yeah, cheers, everybody. So yeah, not a terribly impressive showing in terms of number of people participating right now, but not bad. And once it gets archived, it'll go out to everybody. And what do you guys want to talk about? You got me for at least 20 minutes here, or maybe less than that, but I'm definitely down to talk about all things protecting yourself from this recession. And Trump had said that there would be peace in Ukraine on day one. Remember, that was a campaign promise or a uh, campaign assertion, right? We shouldn't call these campaign promises because so few of them have come through. It was a campaign assertion. It was a campaign assumption, I guess, that him saying peace on day one meant he would push for peace on day one. And now we're at the point where uh, China and Russia are asking Ukraine for safety while they do this parade on the 9th in Moscow or somewhere in Russia. They're asking for safety from Ukraine, and Ukraine is basically saying it is what it is, saying they can't offer them safety. So that's not quite peace. Still thousands of people dying every week, thousands of Ukrainian and Russian conscripts dying every single week. Nobody seems to care about them. It's like a low key Vietnam that people are tuning out while they watch TikTok videos. And again, peace on day one. So we didn't get that. Yeah, we're in a limbo situation. I agree. This limbo situation with China, we don't know if they're going to be our friend again or if they're now a world war sparring partner. So all these things I think bode very poorly for the economy. And this is not me like trying to criticize Trump. This is like just seeing all of the headwinds, right? If you're into aviation, headwinds are very different from tailwinds, right? First Trump term, he had the tailwinds, right? We had this massive stock market rally. People liked the American worker in terms of foreigners, liked the idea of our stuff being made here and being higher quality and all that. And yeah, so I think that this time around, it's the opposite. It's not tailwinds. It's not like everything's benefiting the economy. Headwinds. And Trump has said that this and the next quarter are Biden's stock market, something like that. He said something like that the other day. This is still Biden's stock market. Well, the fact he's not willing to claim credit for it should show you how concerned he is, or how concerned the people around him are about the economy slowing down. And it's not, it's not a process where you can just do one thing and the whole thing changes, right? Economies are complex. They have a bunch of different inputs. So he could say no more tariffs, and it still might not stop what's occurring right now. Because some people think the whole market was just kind of overblown, right? That under Biden, valuations got crazy. And if that's the case, I'm not giving financial analysis here. I don't know. But if that's the case, then it's got to go down at some point, right? It's got to come in line with like human reality. So that's one of the coolest things about the stock market is the price to earnings ratio of stocks, and you see the level of optimism around a certain stock based on that. And here it's like if a stock is trading at 20 times earnings, uh, that's all just kind of shared confidence. That's all just civilization deciding that there's going to be a stable environment for that company to significantly grow. And everything I'm looking at is like the environment's getting less stable. The left is getting completely crazy. They're starting to ratchet up support of AOC for 2028. So the left is going in a really radical direction, which isn't good for markets traditionally. Uh, and the right, batshit insane. This Peter Navarro death by China, where we have to turn off our largest supplier overnight. It's absolutely bonkers. It's absolutely crazy. Our largest supplier, we spent decades getting to the point where stuff is made nicely, cheaply, where it's actually high quality stuff coming back. And then he turns it off overnight effectively. Well, it's going to be a rough summer. Like when the store shelves are literally empty, it's going to be a crazy summer. And so I'm not complaining. I don't have Trump derangement. And I think this is beyond Trump. This is something that would have occurred at some point anyway. And is it happening earlier now because of the tariff pressure? Probably. But this is all overhang that I think had to come due at some point. Yeah, Midwest. If they do drop the interest rate, I do think Bitcoin's going to rip potentially. Could do very well, right? Because there's so many problems with the financial system right now, in the sense that you see the home prices cratering in some of the biggest US markets like California, Florida, New York, New Jersey. So you see cratering housing prices. That has to impact mortgage backed financial stuff eventually. It's not all disconnected, so we're seeing weakness kind of across the board. Uh, and at a certain point, something's going to break. Again, these are complex systems. It's not all Trump. It's not all Orange Man bad. These are complex systems, and we're seeing the signs of wear and tear pretty much. And now more people than ever are putting just their meals on installment plans through things like Klarna, the buy now, pay later stuff. And then they pay that off using a credit card. So there's some kind of credit bubble emerging there potentially, right? Because you're buying food on credit and then you're paying it off with just another form of credit, which still comes due eventually. It's like you have a month to pay it off, right? Then you have to make a minimum payment. So at some point you have to pay something. And I don't think people feel very strong right now. So the numbers wise, the stock market is roughly back to above where it was on Liberation Day when Trump decimated the market with his that big poster he held up with all the tariff rates. Since Liberation Day, we're now back above that in terms of equity values, which is a good sign. I think that's really good, but it's still down from January. I think people are still feeling a little bit lighter, and the fact that gold has now hit a new all-time high a number of times this year, that's like a blinking red light on the control panel that something's wrong. If the strong U.S. dollar is so effing strong, I don't see how gold should be trading above $3,300 an ounce or whatever it hit recently. Doesn't make sense fully unless we're in some kind of like cultural bubble. Unless we're in some culture bubble, right, where we just can't see out of our Overton window that Russia's actually doing better against Ukraine or China's actually 10 years ahead of us or some weird, Z factor that none of us are really perceiving right now. But yeah, it's fun to be able to do these from time to time and to get so many interesting comments in the troll box from some of our oldest and most interesting supporters. See, Phil, Ken. I remember Ken for many years has been a big Fulcrum supporter. Pretty neat. So, in many ways, we're like in the distant future that was talked about in the Amazon books I wrote years ago, which is pretty weird to think about, right? So, we're now in the end game for things like cryptocurrency and sound money. And we don't have a pandemic this time, but we have a president who is throwing out all these tariffs on top of just economic weakness. I think there's just weakness on its own. and he's ratcheting it up maybe with the tariffs, but it's there anyway. Right? The threat of world war, I think, is keeping everything kind of locked up. Uh, but yeah, what a pleasure to be back, and a lot of great discussion happens over on Substack. Be sure to add your email there if you don't already follow. There's a free and a paid version. The free version honestly gets you a lot of stuff for free, so don't be shy. Uh, yeah, Substack. We have a lot of great discussions in the comments. That's also how the podcast goes out. And so I was mentioning I was in Austin recently. I also went to the Mothership while I was there. Mothership is this comedy club that was, I think it was started by Joe Rogan and some other people. Uh, but yeah, the Mothership, really good show. Had a good time. But I thought about how lucky I am that I don't have to like uh, scramble for fame. That's not really what we're looking for here. You know, so what a sad hustle. These people who need to be famous to make money. What an absolutely sad hustle. It's like they have their priorities in reverse, essentially. So you should have money first, and then if you want to dabble with things like travel or fame or, learning how to learning magic tricks or whatever it is you want to do after you've made it. It seems like that would be the time to do it, right? Like it seems like learning how to scuba dive or becoming a professional pilot or something. Seems logically those things would happen after you have some resources, right? After you have some money. But the people looking for fame, like journalists and most podcasters and comedians, uh, they do it in reverse. And that's probably where a lot of their problems come from, right? Is like they're asking for support for something they should be doing out of pleasure, which is not to belittle their field. It's just to say that these are fields where you need resources. Like if you're a gold mine company, you're not begging for money, right? Like if you're a gold miner, you have capital, right? If you're a real estate developer, presumably, if you're building skyscrapers, you have some capital. You're not at the begging stage. Whereas people who are building their fame are at the same time trying to like crawl up the economic ladder. They're trying to ascend. And I don't know. I think that's why so many of these people suck, to be honest. It's why so many of them are just not super big backbone people, you know? And obviously, there are some hilarious people who just rise really fast and deserve every second of it. There are people like that too. But I think that's the problem, right? I think if you were to treat that like every other field, where no, you need to get somewhere first. You need to have some stability before you try to become famous. I think it'd be much different, maybe in a positive way. Somebody says tariffs funded the government prior to creation of the income tax. I am aware of that. I am aware of that. However, the government was much smaller back then. The U.S. was a different kind of thing, right? We weren't spying on the whole world via the internet, which costs a lot of money to do to analyze all that data. We didn't have our military in practically every country. Every country we do business with. So it's a different world, and the costs are different. So I don't know. I think if they're going to tariff all our products, we should get some real relief on the income tax side for sure. Right? They got to figure something out. No, I think we need to reduce the size of the government. I think it needs to be smaller than it is now because we're paying in what close to half of our income already is paying into this system where they berate us all day and say they don't have the money to do anything. It shows you there's too many people. The head count is too high. All this stuff could be automated anyways. Like when you walk into a pharmacy in a big city and they have the cameras on you. So you're already not private. They're already violating your privacy in a sense, right? Of course, they're not actually violating it because you're in public. But see, we have cameras everywhere through America, and China just takes it to the next step where it's AI automated, and they know the second you start causing shit. You start causing shit in some supermarket in China, their AI machine learning systems finds it on you know a CC camera within seconds, and they dispatch someone. And I'm not arguing for any of these technologies. I'm not saying this is what we should do. I'm just saying if you were to do that, the head count would come down. You wouldn't need as many people in government to still keep everything safe, you know? So point is I'm in favor of a smaller government just so people pay less. And they were paying way too much. And again, there's nothing marvelous happening right now. We're not going to the moon. We're not going to Mars. They're not curing cancer with public money. So where the fuck is it going? Where's all that money going? Clearly things need to be downsized. Uh, yeah, it's weird though. Like, what are the great public projects at the moment? Where is all this money going? And people say the roads and stuff. Well, a lot of that stuff is handled by the state government, right? So, I don't see any comments in gray. So, if you're seeing a comment that's grayed out, that means I'm not seeing it because every comment I'm seeing here looks normal. But yeah, I think a recession is going to put a lot of strain on the traditional financial system because, again, it relies on things like housing values, and the housing values have plummeted in real terms, right? Plummet in the housing values. That has to impact community banks at a certain point, and then to a lesser extent, big banks. And depending on how bad the recession gets, really the less you want to have your money in the bank, in a sense, right? And now with things like Bitcoin and gold, the people aren't desperate. They're not desperate to sock their money in a bank and just do some Hail Mary pass. Some Hail Mary that if everything collapses, you might still get your money out because you live close to the ATM machine or because you believe the FDIC will actually be able to pay you out if everybody else fails at the same time. So we don't have to do that like in 2008, right? We have gold and Bitcoin. So it's a neat experiment unfolding in some ways, right? Is like they're signaling that there's a slowdown. They're signaling it. And then if you're intelligent, you can think out a little bit further and go, where are the banks going to get their money from? If they're going to be offering lower interest rates soon on deposits, as some people believe, where's the money going to come from? Right. So yeah, be sure to get that Substack link in description. Add your email. I'm going to put out some interesting stuff in the next before Wednesday. I'm not in a rush to send this email because I want to edit it and make sure it sounds good. But just some research thoughts. Any other final ideas or thoughts before we end this in a minute? Nothing else going on. I'll give you guys the floor. Final thoughts and observations. Phil says, keep stacking that BTC. Keep stacking that Bitcoin. Yeah, again, it was interesting to me that I was in Austin recently visiting Texas, and on the cocktail menu at a restaurant I was at, BTC was the name of one of the high-end drinks, BTC. But it's surprising as much cultural relevance as Bitcoin has, right? With people constantly talking about it on the news and Bloomberg and CNBC being obsessed with it, and it being name checked all the time in the culture. It's weird that you don't actually see it out in the wild. Like when I go out and get coffee or something, or when you go to a restaurant, nobody wants you to pay in Bitcoin. Seems like there's a real opportunity there for somebody to actually make that happen with the QR codes and all that stuff. Like they used to do years ago. When Bitcoin was cheaper, people actually used to use it. And it kind of terrifies me that we don't see it being used anywhere, right? That it's just like some sock of value for BlackRock and a bunch of other rich people. And that's great, right? The fact that they believe in it is great. But I'd like to see the small people actually use it throughout their daily life because then that gives it staying power, right? That means if it becomes politically less popular and if AOC is president in 4 years and she wants to go after it, she's going after the payment method that millions of people use at their local coffee shop and their local bar. She's going after their communities, right? If people actually start to use Bitcoin locally, then any enemy of Bitcoin will be seen as going after people's communities. It essentially gives it permanence. And it scares me that it's just a bunch of ETFs and a bunch of total political preference. The fact that the Trump family really likes it. It scares me that that's what we're relying on. And we have no choice, right? It's good that we're, riding on good luck, but I don't think that's the long-term foundation we want, right? So start using it, even if it's just like paying your roommate or paying your maid or something, or tipping somebody, right? Like start using it, start getting more on-chain transactions. Because otherwise, I'm just terrified the whole thing's going to fade. We're not fade, but be invalidated by changing political winds, right? Because Trump won't be there forever. It will be a different president at some point. And how do we make this so permanent that to go after it would be as ridiculous as outlawing gold, right? Yeah, the Lightning Network, exactly. There are a lot of great apps that use the Lightning Network. There should be some push to get local merchants to start accepting it and using it. And then other people will see us using it, and there'll be like a, bandwagon effect maybe. People see it's actually useful. How useful is it right now? Again, it's being used by BlackRock as a sock of value, so they don't have to pay the insurance and security costs for a bunch of gold bars, right? Yeah, interesting times. It's cool. We're already into May. At first, 2025 felt a little daunting. Felt a little like foreign territory, like Black Mirror episode or something. But I feel like I'm getting used to it, getting used to Trump's daily either attack or praise of the economy, and I'm getting used to being a true short-term trader, true short-term investor, where I look out maybe no more than a week. And obviously, my faith in Bitcoin is different. I believe in Bitcoin forever. I believe in gold pretty much until and unless they are able to lasso some asteroid and send it back to low Earth orbit with trillions of dollars of gold on it, right? Until that moment happens, I'm relatively confident that gold is a good alternative to the blockchain. But what else? Like, what else is out there? And actually, I wanted to talk about this real fast. I'm glad I reminded myself of this. I think that as you scale the pyramid of needs in life, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? As you get up to the tippy little rectangle at the top, or sorry, little triangle, the absolute top of that pyramid, and you're looking down at what you actually need from here on out. If you own a lot of stuff, uh, you become like a museum keeper, become a manager of a museum. And maybe that's someone's calling out there. Maybe there are people who just like to collect things and dust things off and catalog everything. maybe there are some people who really love to do that. Their passion, their calling is to be a mid-sized museum manager. But for the rest of us, it sounds like a burden, right? And if you own a lot of stuff, you become a museum manager. You're not a more free person. You're not a wealthy person necessarily. You're paying a bunch of insurance costs, and you're worried that when you step away, if your place were to burn to the ground, you'd be out a lot of money, right? So uh, you own a lot of stuff. You're not a more free person. And in the past, you had no alternative, right? It's like you had to own stuff if you had money, even things you didn't want. You'd buy like a you buy a super yacht or a second jet. You get the second jet even though you didn't really want it because it was a way to sock value. Because you knew the FDIC is, just the public etiquette polite. It's polite to believe in the FDIC, but numbers wise, if the system were to fall through the floor, it would not be able to make everybody whole. And rich people know this. Poor people don't spend much time thinking about it, I guess. Rich people know this. And so in the past, that you had to consume, you had to become the museum manager in a sense. And now you don't. Now you can actually stay true to your principles, stay true to your values as a human being. And if you make a lot of money because you have a good career or because you're lucky or smart, you can sock that value away in Bitcoin in a way that's totally dematerialized. How cool is that? 100% dematerialized. Whether you're socking away $1 million or $1 billion, it's taking up the same amount of space. And even gold, even when you get into large amounts of money, even gold becomes an unreasonable, unwieldy thing where you don't want to be in the same room as gold, right? You really don't, because someone will just kill you. Someone will kill you and take your gold. Uh, so it becomes this weird liability. Uh, and so Bitcoin frees the rich people. It frees them in a way that they haven't had before. There's more privacy to it, to sense. Because again, it's totally dematerialized. You have a password protected wallet. It's someone doing blockchain analysis. They can say, oh, there's a big wallet. There's a big wallet on the blockchain. That's all they can say, right? That's it. If you've done your homework, that's all they can say. And that's wild. It's absolutely wild. Yeah, I'm glad you like these discussions. Definitely. I do the weekly podcast. So if you like these discussions and you want kind of a more monologue version, I don't do a live stream when I'm recording them usually. So the weekly podcast just shares like research thoughts and stuff. Get that over on Substack, which I'll put the link again in the troll box real fast. All right, gonna head out in a minute. Thank you guys. You've been great. Awesome company, awesome brand. Really the best, the absolute best. And yeah, so like money wise, I take things day by day and week by week. And I do think we're heading toward a recession. And rather than be all negative and InfoWarsy about it, rather than say, oh, the puppeteers want us to have less purchasing power. That's probably true, right? It's probably completely true. They want to save the earth. They think Earth is melting. We can't have a bunch of new multimillionaires like David Seaman because Earth is melting, right? Well, fuck these people. We'll get through this, and this will probably be the catalyst that makes crypto stronger than ever. Thank you guys.